slides, but this is absolutely beautiful. So our next presenter, before we go to admission, is none other than Breanna Lawson. She's a senior communications major with Appalachian Studies minor, and she did her internship up in Pineville in the Pineville-Bell County Public Library. So without further ado, Breanna Lawson.
So, you want to be a change maker. This is the phrase, the question that I first saw and that drew my attention on the course list for GSTR 110 at Breanna College. This is also the phrase and the question that inspired my Berea EPG journey and my EPG journey. But before I get too far into that, let me introduce myself. I'm Breanna Lawson. I'm from Pineville, Kentucky. I'm a member of cohort 14, which just basically means I did EPG in 2017. I am a senior now, and I study communication and Appalachian Studies. I wanted to give you a heads up of where we're going to go in my presentation. So we'll start with the internship search. Then we'll go into site. We'll move into the role. I'll talk about how I use the EPG abilities, and we'll end with what's next. So the internship search. The search for my internship actually began a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. Freshman year. So for some in the room, freshman year wasn't that long ago. You might actually be a freshman right now. And while it feels for me like it was yesterday, I know that it wasn't because of the exponential growth that I've seen in myself. My first year at Berea is where I gained a change maker, entrepreneurial mindset. So I want to talk to you about my freshman year, 2 parts. Part 1, GSTR 110 with Dr. Peter Hackberg. This is where I learned how to iterate and make a lot of rough drafts. And I also learned the ins and outs of social entrepreneurship. That led me to EPG, Part 2. This is where I learned how to apply the entrepreneurial mindset in an Appalachian context. But soon after EPG, I had to start to look for my DFE. And so I called Dr. Hackberg up, and we got 8 a.m. coffee, which is hard. And he and I talked, and through that, a question was formed for my first internship search, which was, do I continue to apply the entrepreneurial mindset in an Appalachian context, or do I apply it elsewhere? This led to 3 types of internships that I looked for. This is also my slide from last year. So I looked for an internship in Appalachia, an internship in a similar place to Appalachia, or a professional internship in an urban environment. I quickly struck through the first 2 and chose door number 3, into a professional internship in an urban environment, or roughly translated, Cruise Crossroad internship in Chicago. But then I thought to myself that I should circle back, and so I went to an internship in Appalachia for my final summer at Berea. That's where the Pineville Public Library comes in. You may be asking yourself, where the heck is Pineville, Kentucky? So, here's a map of Appalachia with a convenient circle around Bell County. Now, does anyone remember where I'm from? You're right, yeah. So, yeah, I went home. Pineville, Kentucky. And that's where the Pineville-Bell County Public Library comes in. So, the Pineville Public Library is like any other library. It's government funded. Hold on, let me stretch this out. It's government funded and it's accessible by the general public. But the importance of the library is that it's a hub of knowledge, resources, and opportunities. And it's one of the last places that you can go to for free. You aren't expected to buy anything at a library. That was important for a poor kid like me. So I'm very thankful that my mom took me to the library, because the library and the librarians that worked there were an influential part of my childhood and where I went after that. And I was excited to return and be a part of the change. So my internship role. My internship role at the library was twofold. I was a librarian, but I was also a communication assistant. And I worked mainly with Director of Children and Youth Services, Erica Overbay. I did things like create promotional materials and facilitated events for the summer reading program, A Universe of Stories. I also worked behind the desk and shelved and and also helped the other librarians with their tasks and programs, just like anyone else. And overall, the Pineville Public Library helped me to develop invaluable skills in strategic communication and public service. So I'd like to now tell you a few stories through the EPG abilities from my internship. We'll start with engaging complexity and uncertainty. So over the summer, I engaged complexity and uncertainty. One way that happened is that I had to shelve Hillbilly Elegy, which is a controversial book surrounding representation in Appalachia. But me being the expert communicator, Appalachian Studies minor, and changemaker that I am, I reached out to the branch manager and asked if we could buy Appalachian Reckoning, which is a multifaceted dialogue that goes along and around Hillbilly Elegy. She said yes. And then, so another story that relates to literature, but on the other side of Appalachian literature, is James Still. There was an older patron that often came in to the library, but he couldn't read as well. And so one of the librarians asked me if I had any recommendations for him. She had already given him books by Jesse Stewart, who's another Appalachian writer. And I automatically thought of James Still, who is the author of River of Earth and Patterns of a Man and Other Stories, which is a book of short stories, something that was perfect for him. You may be asking yourself, Breanna, how does that engage complexity and uncertainty? Well, it's because Appalachia is a conundrum of stereotypes and realities. It's complex and uncertain, and I am so thankful for my internship because it allowed me to actually engage what I studied at Breanna with Appalachian Studies in a more real way than I have in a long time. But moving right along, we'll talk about values and ethical structures. So value is defined by Dr. Google as a person's principles or standards of behavior, one's judgment of what is important in life. So my summer helped me to see clearly that my values differ from those back home. Now, don't hear me wrong. Not everyone's opinions differ. Not everyone's values differ from mine. But there were some people who were especially cruel and who were downright mean about differences. Differences like race and ethnicity and sexual orientation. Things that do not align with my values. And so there was a shock within me each time that I heard someone say something like that. Because although I'm aware of injustice, it still hurts you to hear people say what they do. Complete dehumanization, even if it's not about you. And so that helped me to learn that while I want to stay in Appalachia, I think I need a few more years outside of my home before I go back to Pineville specifically. So now we'll talk about something else, something maybe a little more lighthearted. Mobilizing resources. But it's me, so how lighthearted can we get, right? So, mobilizing resources. There's only one story that comes to mind for me when I think about this. And it includes trees and computers. You're like, what the heck, Breanna? Okay, so a man came in one day to the library, and he was showing me pictures, and he needed pictures of trees. And I was like, okay, I can help you get some pictures of trees. Because he didn't have as much skill set in computers, and he needed someone to help him. But I was a little overwhelmed and asked another librarian to help me. That's when she told me that we actually couldn't help him because of copyright issues. But he could get on a public computer and find them and print them himself. So that's what we did. I checked out a public computer to him, I sat down beside him, and I did my best to teach him how to use a computer. So that includes things like left click is select, right click is option, Google, copy and paste, things that I didn't know how to describe. But eventually was able to do that through my own personal capital as well as my on-the-fly communication. You may be looking at my presentation right now from the beginning to where we are now and thinking, this is a lot about advocating change. That's a common thread. And you're right, but when I reflected on my Breanna and DPG journey, something was off. Because I was dissatisfied with both of my internships. Why, you might ask? Well, because of 9 to 5. Imagine Dolly Parton singing to you. The volume's not working. That's okay. So I started to understand another common thread between my experience was this 9 to 5 life. And I advocated change in both Chicago and Pineville, but something was off. I couldn't figure out what about 9 to 5 completely destroyed my soul, but I asked Dr. Hackford, and he asked me, what fuels you? I started to think about that, and I realized that there was a part of the equation missing. It's what I've now deemed as change-maker culture. So Breanna is not 9 to 5. It's more than that. And I'm not afraid of the commitment, and I feel fueled here. And I felt fueled at certain points in my internship. But it was only when advocating change and being supported by change makers aligned. People like Erica are one of those change makers. But a consistent fuel only comes when I'm in a context like Breanna or EPG, where advocating change and change maker culture adds up. If you ask me what's next, I'll probably tell you Breanna Corps or crew or some other job in the marketplace. But what I'm really going to do is repeated iteration. I'm going to make those rough drafts I learned about in 110. And I'm going to keep trying until I get the equation right for me. But that's only my equation. Each of us in the room has a big idea, a purpose for their life. So I'll end my presentation the way that I began, with a question from Dr. Hackford. So, what fuels you? What a relief. Questions?
In the coming years, when you return to Pineville, which I'm from Pineville as well, I'm very familiar with Chain Rock and everything down that way. What change would you want to make? What mission do you want to take on once you've gotten all the skills you need from being in the outside world to return back to home?
That's such a good question. So she asked me about what kind of change that I want to bring back to Pineville when and if I do go back, which I hope to. And I think that, like I said, change making's already there. Pineville has seen a downtown revitalization like no other. When I was there were no restaurants. There was not much anything. But now, through entrepreneurship and that mindset, it's increasing. So I think if I were to go back, I would want to be a part of that. But I would want to add something like Appalachian identity to it. And I think that's complex and it's diverse and it's multicultural and multi-ethnic. And I think that that's a big idea, but I would want to find a tangible way to influence that into my own community. she asked me if I ever felt regretful for choosing Pineville. I think yes. I think there were many parts where I didn't think I could do it anymore. Everyone knew me. Everyone thought that they knew something about me and who I was. And that was hard, especially coming from Breanna in Chicago and then going back home. It was difficult. And I think that I would have said I regretted it before I started reflecting and doing the presentation. But I think now I can say that I'm grateful because, one, I learned that I need more time before I go back. And two, I learned that I'm so very grateful for Pineville. And I think I've always been, but in a different way now because I've been outside of that community for so long. Yeah.
So you might have already said it, but what's your definition of changemaker culture?
Mhm.
And what, I guess, what qualities Breanna has that you saw that?
Yeah. So actually my roommate and I were talking about this last night. So she asked me about changemaker culture. I think changemaker culture comes back to the entrepreneurial mindset. And so the entrepreneurial mindset is a different way of thinking. You can almost think of it like fixed versus growth mindset. So I can't do this versus I will eventually learn how to. I think so that's like the individual mindset that you can have. But the difference for me with changemaker culture is that being surrounded by other changemakers. If you look around this room right now, there's people that are making great impacts at Breanna and broader. And so I think that that's what fueled me, and that's what I want to find after Breanna. That help? Okay.
Thanks, Maria. Beautiful presentation. Okay, so I can tell you guys are a little bit tired, so we're going to take a quick intermission.